Bill Con Show, Detective Agencies opening up its doors. New location right here on Michigan Avenue. High rent.
Moving on up.
Thank you, Sylvia Perez. Speaking of ABC7, not that we were, Chuck Gowdy, head of the I-Team for ABC7, is on the Super Celebrity Hotline. And Chuck, it's always a pleasure.
Do you pay your guests more now that you're in the high rent district?
No, but I've called upon you for I pay him exactly what I was paying him over at that other place.
Which will go nameless today.
Yes.
Well, you could double that and you'd still be paying the same.
Right. It's going to go nameless and valueless. All right. So let us, this is a great story. And you were kind of at the very tip of the spear on the telling of this story in the first place. That there is a Chicago area priest who found himself, it's a mobster, a priest, and a violin. And
how about that combo?
Walk into a bar. All right, I'll let you tell this. You told it so well from the very beginning. This all goes back to this Calabrese family, right? That was the worst of the worst.
Frank Calabrese was arguably the lead defendant in the Family Secrets mob murder trial a few years back. And Calabrese is convicted. He killed a bunch of people, and he goes to federal prison in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, where he's going to spend the rest of his life. He's already in his 70s, so he's down there in solitary confinement because they think he's such a bad guy he needs to be locked up in these special circumstances, as they put it. And he gets visits for Holy Communion from the prison chaplain. And the prison chaplain becomes friends with him, and Calabrese starts handing the guy notes with instructions about what to do on the outside for him. And the most notable part of this is that he wants him to recover this priceless violin that had been stashed at his house up at Lake Delavan, Wisconsin. And the priest ends up getting charged with violating a federal law that says you can't take notes or other contraband from somebody who's locked up in solitary at a federal prison. Yesterday, he pleaded guilty to that.
But is it a crime to go to the guy's house and then get the contraband, or is it just?
He was not. Well, not only did he not get the contraband because the violin is still missing, but he did some of these things, but he wasn't charged with any of those things. He was charged with essentially breaking the prison rules that say you can't do what he did.
You can't befriend a prisoner. Okay, wait a minute now, Chuck. Hi, Chuck, my old buddy,
Hi, Sylvia.
former neighbor. How are you?
Good.
Question for you. Okay, so how does a prison chaplain become good friends with a mobster? What happened there?
Well, I mean, when you're the prison chaplain, your congregation is largely thieves, crooks, burglars, murderers, etc. I mean, you're dealing with the worst of the worst, and Frank Calabrese Sr. was right up there. But that's what you do when you're a prison chaplain. I mean, he was going to counsel him and give him communion, and Calabrese saw this guy as somebody who could help him recover this violin that he didn't want the federal government to find. The feds were going to take all of his assets and sell them to satisfy the fines that he had against him from his court case.
Well, who did he want to give I mean, obviously it wasn't going to do him any good.
No, he wanted the priest to sell it, and then the cash would be split up amongst Calabrese's family, friends, at least those who were still talking to him.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because we got to go back a few years even prior to this, when Frank Calabrese was in the joint with his son, and they were in Milan, Michigan, at a federal penitentiary there. And this is an interesting thing about Frank Calabrese Sr. He did not care about the fact that he was in prison. He was still going to run his business operations, and including murder plots and all kinds of other crazy stuff. And they used to go to the day room. He and his son and another associate used to go to the day room in Milan, Michigan, and speak in code in this. And they created this language. It was sort of a partially Italian, partially some of the parochial kind of terms that are used in where they are from, and English, and then made up words to communicate with each other about these plots that they had. And then the son ended up, the feds were able to figure this thing out because they were watching them, and they're being recorded while they were doing this. And the feds were able to figure this out, and they started to use the son to become a confidential informant against the father, right?
Well, he went to them. He had a change of heart or a fit of conscience, whatever you want to call it, and he decided that with his father locked up, he didn't want to be in the mob anymore, and he went to the FBI and said, "I can deliver my father, Frank Calabrese Sr." And he ended up cooperating with the investigators, and he continued on with these meetings. But at that point, he was not working for the mob; he was working for the FBI.
Right, and he was explaining to them what all the language meant and what everything. And then on the other side of that, Frank Calabrese Sr. gets indicted and then convicted of his activities while behind bars. He's like Drew Peterson, getting arrested while in prison, that's a great trick if you can pull that off.
Prison is merely an inconvenience for some people who go away. I mean, there's a rich history of Chicago mobsters still controlling things from behind prison walls. In fact, some of them are actually more successful doing it that way.
And gangsters, too.
Absolutely.
Mobsters and gangsters.
All I can say is Frank Calabrese must be a charming man, right, Chuck?
Well, he certainly thought he was charming, but if you talk to some of his family members, he was a horrible human being. I mean, he killed people without thinking twice, and he lured his brother and his own kids into this and destroyed their lives along the way.
And Frank Jr.'s written a book about this too. It's pretty fascinating stuff. Right?
He has?
Yeah, I think he's writing a book, or there's something.
He's written a book. He's supposedly close to movie rights on it. Right?
Yeah, right. And interesting casting too. I've been told for this, so it is an incredible story. I mean, didn't Calabrese kill a guy on the tri-state with a bomb? They blew up a car.
It was a trucking executive, the Ogden Avenue entrance to 294 South. It was for its time, it was pretty high tech. It was back in, I think it was 1980 or 81, and they used a remote controlled detonated bomb inside this guy's Mercedes Benz.
They blew
it up.
They put the bomb inside the Mercedes Benz. They were able to go to get it at his residence into the car. And then when he got on the expressway, they'd put, it's like one of those turnaround roundabout circles to get on the expressway. And in the middle of that circle, on the grass, in the middle of the circle, they put a car that looked like it was like it had stalled and was pushed off into that thing.
Mm-hmm,
that thing had the transmitter that detonated the bomb.
Yep.
It was devious, and it was, I think they wanted to do it because it was artful, right? Because it was going to send a message that would go to no end to take somebody out, where they could have taken this guy out in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, that was those were kind of the end of the high times for the Chicago mob. You don't hear much about those things happening anymore.
Yeah.
I've got to wonder though. Did the chaplain ever say, was he threatened by Calabrese? I mean, you say they became friends, and that's why I said, was Calabrese that charming, or were there threats toward the chaplain?
No, there were no threats reported by the priest. The chaplain has said that he admits doing all of this, but he says that he shouldn't have been required to follow these rules of the prison because they're not intended to cover the prison chaplain. They're intended to cover the prisoner. That the prisoner is the person who violated the Federal Bureau of Prisons rules by passing this stuff to him, and that he didn't break any laws by helping him recover a violin that he owned.
But he still pleaded guilty.
He ended up pleading guilty to it. Although his plea agreement does allow for it to be reversed if these appeal items that he has right now before the appellate court come down in his favor. I'm not sure that's likely.
Is he going to go to prison?
Right.
I can't imagine that. I mean, it's a 5-year max with a pretty hefty fine, but he's got no criminal history. Considering the circumstances of the case, his age, his occupation, etc., I think he certainly will be at the low end of whatever the judge decides.
Oh man, and we can work back as the chaplain in the prison too if he goes back in. I mean, he's got related experience.
I don't think that's going to happen either. He has some other issues going on, and he is now largely retired and living in Arizona.
It sounds like a made-for-TV movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, you could take just about any part of these scenarios, Sylvia, and make them into a pretty good movie.
But Frank Sr.'s dead.
We'll leave that up to the experts.
Didn't Frank Sr. just die?
He died a couple of years ago. Yeah. Died in prison.
Yeah. So I mean, that's knowing, and again that it's interesting that thing is still missing. Do the Fed suspect that somebody, maybe even the priest, knows where it is?
I don't think that they suspect that. I think essentially what happened was somebody got to it before the priest could.
And weren't they saying it was a Stradivarius at one
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah, it was definitely. There's paperwork apparently that the feds found that indicate that it was in the Liberace family at one point, and that it was a Stradivarius worth any number of millions of dollars. Although because they don't have it, there's no way to verify any of that.
It had studs in it. It was
Yeah.
studs,
Oh, you know what?
Liberace's.
Oh, yeah. And if you've seen that HBO movie about Liberace, what that poor thing has seen. Oh my gosh, I don't know.
I don't think Liberace and Frank Calabrese Sr. ever crossed paths.
You never know. You never know. Momo Giancana, I'm sure, crossed paths.
That's possible.
Yeah, so that's a possibility.
Down in Acapulco.
Yeah. Oh golly. Okay. Well, as always, Chuck, very, very well done. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Good to talk to you guys.
Good to talk to you, Chuck.
There he goes.
I'll look for that check in the mail too.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna say Tribune Company sent it immediately right to your. It'll be in your paper tomorrow.
Beautiful.
Which is that's actually how the mob does it too.
No, that would be a fish. That's the mayor's office. Sorry.
All right, there he goes. Look at Chuck doing all the comedy here today. All right, thank you, Chuck.
Take care.
All right, great Chuck Gowdy.
He is so good.
He
He
just
is
hung
a
up
great
on us.
reporter.
He really is, but
Yeah.
only in Chicago do you get a story like this.
It's crazy.
All right, here's the deal. I got a Stradivarius. It is, you have to move the refrigerator out of the kitchen. It is. Oh,
It's
man.
a great story, and they never found it. So
But the guy still has a house. That's the most amazing part of the
Yeah.
story. He's got a house someone's paying for
it's
up
going to
there.
be buried somewhere. We're going to hear about this in 10 years. The famous Liberace former violin.
And by the way, Father, when you leave, make sure the water's still dripping because the last thing I need is a flood. The guy was never getting out of prison.
That's amazing.